back in the trailer. As you can hear, it's raining outside. Building the kitchen table. This is going to be the underlayment, pallet wood on top. Got my double boiled linseed oil. It's going to be my waterproof. I actually got that to do a rifle stock. And then rather than go out and spend more money on some other sort of stain or waterproofing sealant, I decided to use this. So give that a shot. But yeah, tight quarters. You know, stuff is packed in here, but I can wiggle my way over here and reach all the corners and make it happen. It's raining outside. What other choice do I got? And as you can see, I actually have the table legs in the trailer as well. So, but yeah, actually, think it's kind of cozy in here, you know, just doing what I can with what I got. I'm using Raka 127 resin and then the 350 non-blush hardener. You can Google those and read all about them. It's supposed to be a really superior product. I already clear silicone every gap on this table, just because I don't have a ton of epoxy because it's expensive. I wanted to just try to keep the epoxy up on the surface and not have it sink down into a bunch of thick cracks or drip off the table more than necessary. I haven't decided if I'm going to end up epoxying these trim pieces or not, or whether I just leave them with this stain and polyurethane all in one. But yeah, I'm excited how the wood's looking. I think it's going to turn out pretty great. Got the industrial iron pipe or steel pipe, black steel pipe legs on there. Alright, so we are mixed up and ready to go. So board number 1, good. Board number 2. I'm going to start at this end so I don't accidentally touch it once I'm done. I got a bare spot of wood here. Let's see how this works. Looks like it's pulling up pretty good. I barely touched that and that really shot out pretty good, so it's good to know. Got my little scraper tool. Probably just gonna let that actually level on its own. I'll come back and look at it in a sec. I do actually need a little bit more right there. A little hard to control this. You gotta be real gentle. Likes to shoot out. Yep. For these, I'm just going to try to get a drop off of here. That's all I need. Beautiful. A little piece of paper towel, just wipe it flat. at the table. As you can see, it's in my house. We're using it every evening. It's our main dining table, and yeah, I think it turned out well for us. You know, it's not perfect. I'll go through the mistakes I made, some of the things I wish were different, but at the end of the day, I'm very satisfied to sit down and have this solid quality, visually appealing dining table that I made with my own hands, and I've gotten compliments on it. You know, the highly detailed person is going to notice a lot of the things I could have done better, but you know, for a first time dining table build, I'm happy with what I made. So let me run through this. You know, the steel pipe legs, I like those. It was expensive. I would do it again. Definitely am happy I made that decision. I like the look too. Moving on to the underlayment, you know, just plywood, coated it in double linseed oil just for some water protection. For the kind of under support and that part of the build, just did construction grade lumber, stained it with the same stain that's on here, a Poly Shades, I think Minwax brand Poly Shades, gloss black. Even though, you know, this is a gloss, it's nowhere near as glossy as the epoxy, so I like the contrast. I would do that again. So coming down to the pallet wood, I would say I would definitely do the pallet wood again. I love the visual appeal. I love the uniqueness of each piece. You know, you got dark, all the shades of wood from, you know, very light to very dark. You know, some of this might even be like a mold, I'm not sure. All this wood was just sitting outside, you know, day after day, and all the weather being a pallet until I came and turned it into this. So I know there's spalted maple. I'll make sure you get to see that. Some cool looking knot holes, even some pinkish red grain over there. So the pallet wood was a ton of work, obviously, because it's so bowed, twisted, bent, whatever other word has to do with wood contorting. But that being said, I did you know, put heavy weights on the pieces for a couple of weeks. I think they were damp at that point. The thought was to try to get them to flatten out and stay flat. Might have helped some. And then when it came to actually getting them lined up and ready to epoxy on top of, I did some shimming underneath. You know, you could think, well, why don't you just sand the whole top down and make it nice and flat like you would with a lot of tables, you know, if you're throwing together a workbench or a butcher block cutting board. That's what you're going to do. Just glue or, you know, scrap some stuff together and then just sand it until smooth. Well, if you want the visual appeal of these unique pieces, you know, the unique grain, you can't sand, because, you know, you see right here, that's what happens when you sand. Just loses all of its color, all of its texture, and so that wasn't an option. So I shimmed from the bottom to try to level them out, and then I had big gaps. I made a mistake by putting silicone in the gaps and silicone in some of these screw holes. Wish I had not done that, because the epoxy does not adhere to it well. And it also, you know, this is personal opinion whether you think the silicone underneath the epoxy looks cool or not. Definitely does a unique kind of shiny thing to it. You know, I think it looks kind of cool, but not sure I would want it there if I could make it go away. Yeah, so I went silicone. I did some wood filler. Don't really love the look of that either, just because it's not wood grain, it's not texture. It just looks kind of like a wood colored brown Play-Doh. So I want you guys to comment if you have a better idea. What could I have used to fill large gaps in the wood? Because what I didn't want to do was take my $100 worth of epoxy, and I only had, you know, gallon and a half, couple gallons, and pour it on the table and have it just drip through constantly through all these different holes, you know, and then half my epoxy would be under the table and not on top where I wanted it. So that's why I made that choice. It was a money issue, and so yeah, let me know if there's something better I could have done there. I did multiple small pours because I was not familiar with epoxy. This is my first time doing epoxy pours. I'd watched some videos, mostly of thick pours with river tables, and thought I'd done my homework. Really didn't know enough about epoxy, so I made some pretty big mistakes, one of which was getting my heat gun too concentrated, and so I actually crystallized a few areas and had to completely scrape and sand them off and redo it. You know, I had my temperature laser thermometer and noticed that, I think it starts crystallizing around 200 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a guess or an estimate based on what I remember. But you really want to stay south of 150. You don't want to be getting the epoxy too hot, because it's just going to create those types of problems where it starts hardening, crystallizing right in front of you. So I had some success taking out some air bubbles with the heat gun. I tried a torch, didn't really like it. You got to be way quicker with it. If you hang out with the torch too long, you're going to have it on fire before you know it. But yeah, I just never really fully figured out how to mix well so it's fully mixed, because I did have some sticky parts that I had to come back and sand off and redo because I didn't mix the epoxy well enough. So if you ever get sticky or consistently tacky epoxy that never hardens into that glass feel, it's because it wasn't mixed well enough. I still don't have the expert's knowledge on mixing epoxy. I guess I would just have to do continuous epoxy projects until I just kind of, or learn from someone who's done a lot, to kind of have a visual idea of, okay, this is what a good epoxy mix that I'm about to pour looks like. Maybe it still has a lot of small air bubbles, and there's just a way to have those all rise to the surface and get out before it hardens, or maybe there's a way to mix bubble free. I didn't find it. I always had lots of little bubbles in my epoxy, and I'll show you areas of the table where there's not a single bubble, and so I can't tell you exactly why that is, and then other areas have bubbles. I do know the pallet wood being so crummy, just in terms of a solid, dense, perfect piece of wood. The pallet wood has, more cracks and holes in it than your furniture grade lumber, and so I think that was a problem. The areas where I hadn't really seal coated, which is something I learned after the fact of pouring epoxy, that if I had done a great seal coat, maybe I could have had the air bubbles present themselves in the first coat and dealt with them somehow, and then my next coat, thicker of epoxy, I wouldn't have had the bubbles rise to the surface or come up and cause a problem. But you look hard, you're going to find a lot of imperfections, but not the end of the world. So I decided to leave it and not be a perfectionist and redo the entire thing or spend hours trying to fix these small things. I'll just mention I did varnish over the top. Did not need to. I kind of got the idea through reading wooden boat forums and that type of thing. I wish I had just left it epoxy, because the varnish was just more work, and now it has a little bit of a softer, it's not sticky to the touch, but sometimes when a plate is on there, it'll almost feel, definitely gets a stuck feeling when you pull it off. It kind of feels like, oh, that was kind of stuck. So I read that varnish can take months to harden, and this has only been out of the shop for about a month, so maybe I still have a successful harden in my future, or in the table's future. But if not, it's livable. But again, less than excellent. I wouldn't have varnished at all in hindsight. Definitely gave it a yellow tint, which take it or leave it. I think it actually looks pretty cool with the black and the yellow tint, but would have been more of a clearer tint before the varnish. So if you're going to do an indoor table that's not going to be out in the sun, I would skip the varnish. If you are going to take your epoxied wood out in the sun, then you do want to varnish, because UV rays wear out your epoxy and can do not good things to it. You can read up on that. They do have UV inhibiting epoxy or epoxy with UV inhibitors added in, but I don't know if any of them are great enough to where someone would say, yeah, you don't need varnish for the next, years. Probably eventually would wear out. So I think that wraps it up. Thanks for sticking around. Hopefully these mistakes and things I learned can help you in your project. So yeah, I'll just leave you with this. If you're gonna do an epoxy pour, I would buy more epoxy than you need, and I would do some sample pours on a, let's say, clipboard size pretend table. Mix up the amount of epoxy you would need for this, make your border exactly how you're going to make it for your real table, pour it exactly how you're going to do it, heat gun exactly, just make a real live practice table about this big, so you're not spending tons of money on it. And make your mistakes on here, learn on here, so then when you go for the big enchilada, now you got a 7-foot by 39-inch table. You're not going to be making costly mistakes, and you'll have a better end product. So I'll leave you with that. Thanks for watching.